morning. This is Vicky McClifty here from AM Healing My Soul, and today I'm speaking with David Roberts. David has lost a child, so we have a lot in common, but also he's a retired addiction professional and is a adjunct professor in the psychology department of Utica College in Utica, New York. Dave has presented workshops at national conferences of the Compassionate Friends since 2009, as well as for the bereaved parents of the USA. He was also the keynote speaker to the 2011 and 2015 national gatherings of the bereaved parents of the USA. He's a featured speaker, workshop facilitator, and coach for Aspire Place. David is a contributing author for the Open to Hope Foundation and has contributed articles to other online grief sites, as well as Recovering the Self Journal. One of Dave's articles, My Daughter is Never Far Away, can also be found in Open to Hope, Inspirational Stories of Healing and Loss. Oh, you've appeared as a guest on both the Open to Hope radio and television shows and was part of a panel on for the BBC podcast World, Have Your Say, with other grief experts discussing the death of Carrie Fisher. That's really exciting. And yeah, welcome to the show, Dave.
Well, thank you, Vicky. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Oh, Phil, you've done so much in this world, and it's in this grief world that I feel that your knowledge and insight into grief is going to just help so many people, Dave.
Well, thank you, Vicky. I think, like, I mentioned before we got on the show, I think, you have developed an impressive body of work as well. And I think, I've had 14 years of the path of being a parent who's lost a child. So obviously I've had more time to explore and do some things, but I think together, anybody who's experienced catastrophic loss can just do some amazing things and be of service to those who are struggling with loss.
Yes, it definitely, it's something that really helps us as well as helping others, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So your experience, Dave, can you tell everyone what was your catastrophic loss?
Yes, it is. I'm no stranger to loss. I've danced with grief since I've been 5 years old, and I've had a variety of losses over the years. But the loss that really changed my perspective and how I looked at life and how I looked at death was when my 18-year-old daughter, Janine, died on March 1st, 2003, after a 10-month battle with cancer.
Mm-hmm.
She was diagnosed with an incurable, rare, and aggressive form of cancer. It was a connective muscle tissue cancer, where the primary site was her foot. She had injured her foot. It did not respond to traditional therapy, like a walking boot or rest. To make a long story short, they finally did a biopsy, an MRI. Biopsy was suggested for cancer, and what she had was a stage 4, terminal form of cancer. And it was 10 months from diagnosis to her death, and she did die at home with hospice services.
That would have been so hard, the grief around just the diagnosis and then just the rapid deterioration of Janine.
Well, and the thing is that I had just finished the requirements for my master's in social work degree at one of the local state colleges. It was a week before she was formally diagnosed, so I went from feeling exhilarated over having completed my degree, looking forward to expanding my therapeutic skills as an addiction professional, and all of a sudden my priorities in life changed drastically when she was diagnosed. It became more of a concern in terms of more practical matters of being as much of a companion to my daughter as I could throughout her illness. So, my priorities changed drastically.
Yeah. It's just such a horrible thing. And, can you share with us what really helped you in moving through your grief? Like, what was the whole journey like for you?
Well, it certainly had a lot of ups and downs. I think, one of the things that to me is kind of a myth is anticipatory grief, anticipating the death of your loved one, particularly when it results, Vicky, from a terminal illness, that somehow that's going to cushion the emotional blow. And it didn't. It didn't even begin to remotely prepare me for what I began to went through. began to go through, excuse me.
Yeah.
And literally at the age of 47, what I needed to do was to kind of reassess all of my priorities, take a look at my values, my beliefs, and said, okay, which of my beliefs stay, which need to be modified. And it was a very surreal process. It was just none of my training that I had even prepared me for this, for walking the path of a parent who lost a child. And the early phases of grief were, I would say, characterized by lack of concentration, physical fatigue, lack of sleep, just disorientation, lack of concentration. If I didn't really have a specific routine where I was working every day, it probably where that kind of got me out of my funk. And I had just begun teaching at Utica College at that time. If it wasn't for that, it probably would have been, it would have been more pronounced for me. So having that kind of routine helped. But in the beginning, it was just like trying to figure out, what kind of a world I wanted to live in without my daughter and what that world was going to look like.
Yeah.
And it was a very exhausting process. But eventually, I think what ended up helping me initially in the beginning was finding a support group.
Yep.
There was a nun by the name of Sister Rose Troy who ran a parental bereavement support group through a local funeral home. And, first meeting my wife Sherry and I went to, there were 16 other parents. So we looked and immediately we said, geez, we're in a lot of pain, but we're not alone.
Yeah.
And that helped. That helped tremendously.
It does.
So getting that kind of support, I think initially helped us work through the pain. Our shared pain as a group became everybody's gateway to hope.
Yeah.
By sharing that pain, we were able to find hope that we could, in fact, learn to live with joy and meaning again.
Yeah.
And also, I read anything that I could get my hands on, books on grief, books written by other bereaved parents. Yep. I tried to do whatever I could to try to understand what other parents who were longer in the journey than me, what helped them.
Yeah.
And I tried something like that. And eventually it was also beginning to understand that as I progressed with the years, is that my daughter's, presence was still very much felt, that we still had a continued bond. And once I opened myself up to that type of awareness, other very, very gifted healers came into my life who helped show me some different perspectives that helped me break through the illusion that death is final.
Yeah.
So it was a combination of a lot of different things that helped me get to the point of acceptance where I've learned to live in a world without the physical presence of my daughter, but yet I've been able to find joy and meaning again as a result of the challenges with that.
Yeah, and I think that if people need to know that it does take time, and everyone's different, aren't they, Dave? You can't expect to just get over something like that. It's a way of you've just got to change your whole life around that death because, as a fellow parent having lost a child, I know that it's something that it just consumes you. The pain consumes you. So it takes quite a while to actually get to that point where you can be open. I think we discussed the other day when I was talking about, the law of attraction, that when you're in grief, you're at that lowest vibration because we all vibrate, and you aren't open to communication with your loved one when you're in that low vibration. They're waiting for you to get to that stage where you are open to it, really, before you can have any sort of connection.
And that's right. And if you are open to it and you do experience signs and you intellectually recognize that you've experienced a sign, at the stage where our vibrational energy is so low, there's still a bittersweet component to that. Yeah. It's like, great, I know my daughter's with me, or I know my son is with me, but they're not physically here.
Yeah.
But what I have learned over the years, and particularly as I approach my 15th year of walking the path of a parent who's experienced the death of a child, is that when I get a sign from my daughter, it's a sign that she is truly here.
Yes.
And there's no asterisk with that. She's just here in a different form.
Yeah.
And as we talked, I think earlier, I have assimilated or embodied the best parts of my daughter into myself.
Hmm.
So the best parts of Janine become now the best parts of me. So when I'm talking with you, you're getting both of us.
Yeah.
And that's the other way that I've kept the relationship strong.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure that Adam is having a chat with you as well today, and
I'm
no
sure.
doubt Adam and Janine are having a chat.
Yeah, and I really believe that. I mentioned I see his picture in the background, and I can
Yeah.
tell he's just a handsome young man. And I really firmly believe that when we have come together, when any parent has lost a child, they come together with another parent who's lost a child. Their
Yeah.
children are together as well too,
Yes.
because our children are still a part of us. Adam is still your son.
Yeah.
Janine is still my daughter, and that's not going to change
No. No.
because they're living in a different existence right now. That's
Yeah.
not going to change.
That's
And
right.
that's
It's yeah. It's so. What sort of experiences have you had with Janine that you could share with people that you feel that she's really here with you all the time?
well. Music is something that really connected Janine and myself. I remember the first concert that Janine and I went to. We saw, this was back, geez, when she was probably 13. We went to one of the local state fairs and saw two groups. We saw the Goo Goo Dolls and the Gin Blossoms.
Right.
And when during her anniversary dates on March 1st, I would, do a mix of our favorite songs, um, put the headphones on and just, think of her and start silently communicating with her.
Yeah.
And the first time I did that, the first two songs that came on my iPad in the shuffle mode were Goo Goo Dolls and the Gin Blossom song, right back to back. So that was one. That was one way. Typically, I would hear a song on the radio that we had both enjoyed at the same moment that I was thinking of her. There
Yeah.
are other times I've seen butterflies.
Yeah.
She's left me hearts. I mean, literally heart signs,
Yeah.
in a variety of different places, and particularly around very significant, dates in her life, either her birthday or her anniversary dates.
Yeah.
A lot of times we talked about numerology. I will see the numbers 3-1 or 1-3, and 3-1 was her date of death.
Mm.
I'm also connected with her with the number 8. And if you take the number 8, you invert it, and you horizontally, you have the infinity signal.
Yes.
Infinity is power and eternal life, and
Yeah.
that has been a number that's connected us. So if I see any numbers that add up to 8, or I see the number 8 itself, as I'm thinking of Janine, I know she's with me.
Yeah.
And a lot of times she'll come to me through other people will have either mention her name. Or one of the things I told you about is I'm going to a conference next year in Savannah, Georgia. I called the hotel to register, and I talked to a woman by the name of Janine who registered me. And Janine's name was spelled the exact same name as my daughter's name.
Mm.
And my daughter is named the way it was spelled is a very rare form of that spelling. So all of these things allowed me to realize that she's still with me in some way, shape, or form. But until I opened myself up to that level of awareness, until I called that in, I couldn't really see the beauty of the fact that not only was I getting signs, but those signs were significant of the continued bond and relationship that we share.
Yeah.
That's the difference between me now and the difference earlier. Is the signs I received, I said, hey, no, they're great, but she's not here.
Mm.
Now I get a sign, I'm saying she is here. And
Yes.
that's the difference in progression.
Yeah. And what about, like, talking about progression? Who was Dave Roberts before Janine got sick in comparison to who you are now?
Boy, that's a good question, because
Mm.
I've said to a lot of people, I said, you need a search party to find that guy. I
Mm.
mean, you really did. I can tell you what I wasn't is I shut down my ability to be intuitive. I didn't embrace intuition. I didn't embrace spirituality. I
Mm.
didn't believe in signs. I had a psychology degree. I was a here and now type of a guy. I believed in observable behavior. If I couldn't see it, if I couldn't touch it, it didn't exist. So I didn't believe, and I didn't believe really in anything beyond my immediate physical world.
Yeah.
After Janine's death, I started getting all kinds of nudges. I would walk around the block and a butterfly would be following me. I did Janine's eulogy. Okay, I did Janine's eulogy at her funeral,
Yeah.
and to this day, Vicki, I don't know how he did it.
Mm.
I was kind of like in, I think, an altered state when I wrote her eulogy, but I also believe she was guiding me through that.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of different things that happened that I couldn't just, I just couldn't attribute to rational science. Okay, I just couldn't
Mm.
attribute that to rational science. And when I started getting these types of signs that were not based in the rational world, I started thinking, hey, maybe I need to start rethinking how I look at the world. And
Yeah.
that began that the person I am now has embraced intuition. I've embraced, a metaphysical approach. I've embraced a lot of different perspectives. I kind of merged both the psychological world with the spiritual world now,
Yeah.
and that's my philosophy.
Yeah.
I think I'm intensely more compassionate. I'm intensely more. I think, understanding, and I'm more tolerant of other people's views, and that has all been a result of the challenges that I've experienced with Janine's death. And because I've had that type of metamorphosis, these are the types of people that I've called um, into my circle. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of the evolution of my specific grief.
So it's really such a huge growth period for you, isn't it?
It is, and it continues. I always tell myself that I'm a work in progress.
Yeah.
And each day I'm a learner, and I continue to learn. I continue to grow. There
Mm.
isn't anything in my environment that can't teach me,
Yeah.
whether it be an animal, whether it be a student, whether it be somebody else. I'm still a work in progress. At
Mm.
62 years old, I'm still a work in progress, and I'm still
Mm.
learning.
Yeah.
And it's every day I get up now, it's a new adventure for me.
Yeah, that's it changes your whole life, doesn't it?
It, it,
It gives
it
you it
does.
gives it so much more meaning.
It does. And the
Uh,
thing I want to impress to your viewers too is that I have embraced a peaceful perspective, but the nature of our journeys is that the grief journey is so circular that
mm,
it doesn't matter if it's been a year, 5 years, 15, or 20 years. The pain of loss can surface at any time, depending on what's going on
yeah,
at a particular moment.
no,
And there are still days where I feel intense moments of sadness or even days of
mm,
sadness.
mm,
But it's something that in 14 years I've realized is now part of the deal, is
yeah,
part of the existence that we live in. In 14 years, I know how to manage it. I know how
yeah,
to work through it, but it never truly goes away. There's no getting over it. There's no closure. I believe we move through our grief. We adjust to our circumstances,
mm.
and we learn to live a life that is different and with meaning because our loved ones are no longer present.
That's right, Dave. And I think also what's important that people know is that you don't forget them. You know, even with just enjoying your life and don't feel guilty about starting to enjoy your life after you've
Hmm.
gone through loss like
Hmm.
that, because they're not going to want you to be. I mean, imagine Janine, if you were stuck in a dark room somewhere and you just couldn't do anything, and you being stuck in grief and you couldn't live your life. Imagine how she would feel if you were spending the rest of your life like that.
I think she would probably come down from the other side and kick my butt.
Yeah.
Pretty much. She would just come down and give me a swift kick and say, hey, I'm here. We're going
Yeah.
to see each other. We're going to be together for eternity. You live your life the way it was meant to be lived and just trust that I'm with you. And that's,
Yeah.
the thing is, I think so early in grief, Vicki, I mean, we feel guilty when we experience any type of joy or laughter because we
Yeah.
think in some way we're dishonoring the memory of our children.
Mm.
But in reality, we celebrate the memory of our children, or we honor the memory of our children by experiencing joyful moments because
Mm.
they were a tremendous amount of joy to us. And we shared many joyful moments with them. So to experience joy is honoring them
Yeah.
as well as honoring us. And the reality of this world is that we're happiness is not the only emotion we experience. I mean, we experience even before loss.
Yeah.
We experienced a variety of different emotions.
Yeah.
There might have been happiness, sadness, anger, and
Mm.
all of that. Anger and sadness, and isolation. Those are all part of the grief experience, but they
Mm.
all have something to teach us. And if
Mm.
we embrace sadness, if we embrace our anger and try to see the teachings that it contains for us, it's going to help us in terms of navigating our grief journey more effectively because we've embraced all aspects of it, all aspects of the path.
Yeah, as a parent, like I don't know how if you experienced it, but myself, I felt guilty because I didn't save my son. I don't know if you felt the same way, Dave. Whether you felt guilty, that I should have seen the signs. I should have got him to the hospital sooner. I should have done this. I should have done that. And that ate away at me for quite a while. That guilt.
Yeah, and I can share that same experience with you. I mean, I felt very guilty as Janine's father. I always felt it was my job to protect her from anything that could do her harm.
Yeah.
And I really held myself hostage to my guilt and anger because I didn't feel I did enough to help her address her cancer. I tried, I said maybe I could have convinced her for one more clinical trial. Maybe I could have seen the signs sooner. If I wasn't so oblivious and trying to finish up my social work degree, maybe I would have seen all of it, and I would have been able to do something. But in reality, I did the best I could, and we all did the best we could given the hand of cards that were dealt to us. And, my job really wasn't to protect her as much as it was to allow her to make adult decisions. My daughter lived on her terms and she died on her terms. Yeah. She had an opportunity to go to Boston for treatment, and she said, no, I want to stay close to my family. I want to be with my family. I want to be with my friends. We'll do the treatment here. She had a local oncologist whom she trusted explicitly, so we honored her wishes. Had I had wished she would have gone to Boston, I would have wanted to give her every possible opportunity, but it was her decision to live her life and to embrace end of life on her terms. It wasn't my choice for her. And it took me a long time to figure that out, that my job was, as her father, was to let her make adult decisions and not to protect her.
Yeah. Yeah. What advice would you give people who have a friend who's gone through loss? I've come across a few different people in my time, with my own grief, and there seems to be a fear when a friend will lose a child with some people, and they don't know what to say. Is there anything that you could advise people who have someone who's going through grief right now?
I think so. And one, I tell people, if you don't know what to say, you tell the person, I don't know what to say, but I'm here in whatever capacity you need me to be here for you. Yeah. Sometimes the power of our presence, I think, is more powerful than the power of our words. So just simply being present, letting somebody know you're there, doing a gentle touch, hug. And I say things like, please accept my condolences for the death of your son, your daughter, your father, your mother. And a lot of times, if it's a close friend of mine, one of the things early in grief, we say to somebody, if there's anything I can do for you, let me know. Well, in early grief, a lot of times we are so, mentally, fragmented and disorganized. We don't know what we need for ourselves. Yeah. So I encourage, friends to be directive. So let's say, for example, you're going to go to the store. I might say, Vicki, I'm going to the store to get a few things. What can I get you? And then you might think, well, geez, I don't have any milk or food in the house because or food items in the house that I need. So that triggers you to say, can you do this for me? Yeah. So rather than ask somebody to call me if you need anything, just let them know, hey, I'm going to go to the store. I'm going to run this particular. What can I get for you while I'm out? That makes it a little bit more directive until they can kind of figure that out. And understand that for individuals who've experienced grief, and I've always said this, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. No. And if you're going to companion someone who's grieving, you have to really deal with both the ups and the downs. And you have to be willing to bear witness for a parent who's lost a child, probably the most intense pain that they will ever experience, and understand that it's part of the grief process, and not to be intimidated by it and not to be afraid of it, because that's just what it is. A lot of times, parents, and I've had parents tell me this, they have to apologize for their tears. Well, I'm also a compassionate friends support group facilitator in our local area, and one of the responsibilities or the expectations, I say, tears are fine, cry all you want. We got tissues and we got flood insurance, and
Yeah.
you don't have to explain away your tears or apologize for it.
Yeah.
Understand that what you've gone through is the most painful loss a parent's going to go through, and you have every right to cry.
Yeah.
And if you want to sit and cry for an hour, you cry. It's just wherever you need to be at that particular moment, be there. And without trying to justify it, without trying to suppress it, without trying to run away from it.
Yeah, that's so true. And as you said before, it goes on. It's such a long process. I mean, you never get over someone. So one thing that I'd like to share is that keep on talking about them. It's like that. People think that after 2 or 3 years that you've moved forward, you've moved on. That's really cool, but they don't. Not everyone wants to talk about them, and that's something that I love doing, is talking about my son, and celebrating who he was, and because he's still here, and you want to keep his memory alive because he is still with us.
And the thing is, I am gifted. I tell the parents at our Compassionate Friends chapter that their stories are a gift to me. I think birth, death, and marriage are 3 of the most intimate events that we're going to go through in our lives.
Yeah.
They have a parent share their story of the relationship with their child is the ultimate gift for me, because they trust me with their story, and they know that it's going to be honored. And I learned something from everybody's story. I get something from everybody's story. And it continues to inspire me to continue to do what I'm doing. So their stories inspire me, and they continue to help me grow. And I love to hear parents say the name of their children. I say the name of Janine all the time, and I'll talk about Janine with whoever wants to listen to me. And the thing is, 2 or 3 years in this path, we're neophytes. Traditional, I think, in Western society, there is this kind of myth that after a year, you're done with grief, move on, and life remains the same. And any loss changes the landscape of our life. Our life is forever changed.
Yeah.
Whenever we experience a loss, and it's just. The second year in a lot of ways is worse than the first for a lot of people, a lot of parents, because the first year, it's like, for me, I expected Janine was going to kind of just like walk in the kitchen, say, Dad, just kidding, I'm back. Let's pick up where we left off.
That's right.
But I'm just kidding. This was just a dream.
Yeah.
But in reality, 1 year and 1 day after, when I started the second year, I looked and I realized that this is going to be my life. She's not coming back. And then there was kind of an emptiness that kind of accompanied my pain and my kind of sense of loss and just, fragmentation. So that's why a year is a myth, because the second year, in any case of a loss, a very catastrophic loss, whether it's a child, a parent or a spouse that you've had a relationship with for, a deep relationship with, it's going to be painful and more pronounced the second year than the first. So, and it takes the progression for me. It takes as long as it's going to take to get from the raw pain of loss to the point where you've learned how to live in a world that's different. And however long that takes varies depending on the individual. But as long as there's movement towards that goal, it doesn't matter how fast you're moving, as long as you're moving.
What I'd like to ask Dave too is that, I don't get a chance to interview many men about grief, and I know that men experience it differently to women. And could you compare your loss, like your journey with your wife?
Absolutely. And I mean, we had very different styles of grieving. For me, I didn't wear my emotions on my sleeve. It was all about, thinking through my grief. It's all about thoughts. I've told therapists, if you ask a guy what they're thinking, they're probably going to be able to relate to that more than than how they're feeling,
Yeah.
because feeling words aren't typically part of many men's vocabulary when it comes to anything.
Mm.
Um, so, but the reality is that we feel just as intensely as women. We just deal with it differently. We
Yeah.
may distract ourselves from our feelings rather than talk about our feelings. We
Yeah.
may distract ourselves through work. We may distract ourselves through a project. We
Mm.
may distract ourselves just through activity, and we try to literally work through our grief. And I'll get to the women piece in a second, but I want to say this also about men, is that men are very much solution oriented, and we are pride ourselves as being the protectors of our family. And for
Mm.
me, when I saw my wife or my two sons, Janine's two brothers, in a tremendous amount of pain over their loss, it was a reminder to me that I didn't do my job as a father who was supposed to protect their family. So
Mm.
their pain became my pain.
Yep.
And with men in many ways are silent grievers. If we cry alone. Um, and many men have a great deal of difficulty in the beginning accepting support and receiving support. If men work things out, from my experiences, they kind of hang out together, talk, and kind of just work things out that way. For my wife, she was more expressive with her emotions. She would talk about her feelings more.
Yep.
She would cry when she needed to cry. She would express it more, and I understood that. And we just we respected the way each other grieved, and it was different, but at the
Mm.
same time, we knew we were doing what we had to do within the acceptable ways that we grieve. And a lot of times, sometimes a woman will come up to me and says, "Well, my husband doesn't talk about his feelings," and so, with all due respect, he probably doesn't know how to. But ask him
Yeah.
what he's thinking; he'll tell you.
Mm.
Because when you ask a guy what they're thinking, their feelings kind of come into play. So if the
Mm.
guy tells me, I'm thinking that, boy, this is just a totally unfair situation that I've lost my child, I might say, are there any feelings that are coming up as a result of that thought? So to get to men's feelings, get to their thoughts first.
Yeah.
And that's, we're just different. We
Yeah.
grieve as intensely, but differently.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really interesting. I think that it's important, because there are a lot of statistics out there that marriages don't last when there is a loss in the family, like a child loss. And I tend to wonder whether that's true or not too. Do marriages break down because of the death of a child?
I think for me, I don't buy into those statistics.
Mm.
Um, I've heard statistics that are quoted are higher than I believe they actually are. From my perception, Vicky, if a marriage breaks up after the death of the child, there might not have been a strong foundation for that marriage anyway.
Mm.
And that was just the straw that broke the camel's back. In
Yeah.
reality, are there marriages that do break up after the death of a child? Absolutely. But are
Mm.
there other marriages that strengthen
Yeah.
and become stronger as a couple and as a result of the challenges for the death of our children? Absolutely.
Ah.
So I take statistics with a grain of salt, and it isn't going to be gloom and doom for every marriage whose parents experienced the death of a child. I mean,
Mm.
I went to a Compassionate Friends conference and saw over 13 to 1,600 parents, grandparents, and siblings. Many of those parents are still together.
Yeah.
So to me, that if you go to a Compassionate Friends National Conference, that will begin to question the statistics that have been quoted about, marriage difficulties or divorces or separations after the death of a child.
Mm.
So I've never been one to buy into statistics,
No.
just at face value.
Yeah, I reckon if you can survive the death of a child, you can survive anything. To me, it makes the marriage stronger. Well, for me, it has anyway. For us, my husband and I, because you want to be there for each other to support each other. So yeah, I I think that statistics say a lot, and you don't want people to think that their marriage is going to crumble just because they've lost their child.
Yeah, and that's the one thing, because we have enough to deal with singularly and as a couple, and our children
Yeah,
don't, without having somebody come up to you and say, well, I've heard statistics that most marriages end in divorce after the death of a child. That's the worst thing you can say to a
yeah,
couple.
that
That's
is.
the worst thing you could say to a couple who's in the early stages trying to figure this out.
Yeah,
What's true is that what was true for me and my wife Sherry was that we didn't have the energy in the beginning to really attend to our own needs, much less each other's. But
yeah,
that we understood that, and we did the best we could, attending to what needs we had the energy to attend with each other. But again, as time went on, that we both began to adjust to a different reality, and we both began to learn how to discover ourselves again.
yeah.
We went through changes as well too, singularly and as a couple, as a result of that.
Well,
So
that's all part of the growth,
uh-huh.
of what the process involves, and how it actually grows your soul.
Yep.
And I think that it's an expansion of who you are, and as you said before, how much you've changed since before the loss of Janine in comparison to how you are now. And I'm exactly the same. My life is unrecognisable. And it's the same with my children. They've all grown because of it. So in a way, it's a gift that they've been given by their brother,
Uh-huh.
because they're more tuned in to what life's all about,
Yep.
and they're tuned into their heart more.
Yeah, and that's it. And I'm sure Adam is with everybody. You're with his brothers, with you, with your husband.
Yeah.
He can be in many different. His energy can be in many different places at once. You can bet he's taking care of everybody that
Oh, I'm
is
sure he
outside
is.
the physical world. As I believe Janine is doing the same with me, my wife, and her brothers.
Yeah.
I believe she's very much a part of everybody's life, and will
Yeah.
continue to be. Will continue to be.
So, as a takeaway, Dave, what would you give anyone who's going through loss, grief right now, catastrophic grief? What would be your takeaway, your advice for them?
First of all, is be gentle with yourself. Grief, the loss, any type of loss is disempowering. And so be gentle with yourself. Understand that it's going to take time to adjust. It's going to take time for you to figure out where you fit in a world without your children or your loved ones. Avail yourself of as much support as possible. Um, know that it's okay to experience joy amidst sadness, and don't feel guilty because of that.
Mm,
Trust that you've done the best you could given the circumstances that occurred as a result of the death of your child, and embrace every part of this journey. And I'm using embrace
mm,
kind of figuratively as opposed to literally. If we try to suppress sadness, if we try to suppress anger, it's going to be like a beach ball that gets submerged in a body of water. Once we let off the pressure of that the beach ball is going to come right up again. And if
yeah.
that beach ball says anger and pain, and you try to suppress it, and it just continues to come back up, but saying, look, I'm not going away, deal with me. So learn that every part of the journey, whether it's joy, whether it's sadness, whether it's anger, has something to teach us. Don't suppress it. Just bring it to the surface, commit to learn from it, and work with it. And the other thing is that sometimes it's a lot in early grief. It's about survival. So celebrate the fact that you can survive, because survival is the first step towards um, embracing a different level of awareness, changing perspective, and eventually acceptance. And if
Yeah.
what you're doing is surviving, that's okay
Mm.
for now, depending on where you're at. So um, those are kind of some of the takeaways that I can give you. And understand also that your life is forever different, and don't buy into the fact that somebody's going to say, well, you're not the same. Well, no, I'm not the same.
Mm.
Loss changes us. And I'll tell you, Vicki, in 14 years, as I look back, I don't want to be the same.
No, I know
I don't.
exactly.
Because if I
Yeah.
was the same person now that I was 14 years ago, I wouldn't be sitting here talking with you.
No.
And I had to recognize that everything that I stood for had to change. I had to modify the way I looked at the world, the way I looked at life, the way I looked at death. And I had to commit to walking in awareness of and opening myself up to calling in those people and phenomenon that were going to help me adjust to a new life. So
Mm.
if I had been the way I was before and didn't change, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. I'd be curled up in the fetal position somewhere and just probably waiting to die.
Yeah, I'd be the same, Dave. Yeah, it's definitely been a journey for myself, and just what you were saying too with death. You mentioned the other day there was something that came up with that you read somewhere was going to sleep. What was the
Hmm.
how?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I saw this on a Facebook post, and I thought this was so profound. Is that death is falling asleep in one dimension and waking up in another dimension? And
Yeah.
I thought that was so profound because that's that kind of coincides with a lot of the readings I've done about death and the afterlife.
Mm,
And there was one book that I think, mentioned that I had read, and I absolutely is my favorite book on the afterlife, which is The Afterlife of Billy Fingers.
mm.
Um, I don't know if we talked about this in our pre-interview chat,
No, no.
but this was a book that's written by Annie Kagan. Her brother Billy, who had danced with addiction all of his life, died. I think he was hit by a bus or a truck um, in a different state where she lived.
Mm,
And 3 weeks to the day that he died, and on her birthday, he began having extended after death conversations with her
wow.
and communicating about teachings from the afterlife.
Mm,
And it was just a profound book that just, it validated a lot of stuff that I had read earlier. But the way the book just read, it was just beautiful. It was a beautiful story. And one of the things that Billy said, one of his teachings was that death is birth in reverse. And that was to me so profound.
mm,
And so when I saw that quote on Facebook, or that passage, that death is waking up or dying or going to sleep in one dimension and waking up in another, that reminded me of one of Billy's teachings, is that death is birth in reverse. And it was
mm.
just so profound. So, and that's interestingly, I'll tell you a story with this book if you got time.
Yeah,
You want
yeah.
to talk, you want to talk about serendipity. I had a friend of mine who's a shamanistic holistic practitioner, and she's never done this. She hasn't done this since. But just shortly after Janine's 10th anniversary day, she emailed me and another friend of ours who had experienced loss and said, you ought to really read The Afterlife of Billy Fingers. And I said, I'm saying, boy, she's never, ever done this before. So I said, I got to check this book out.
Mm.
So I found it on Amazon and I read the synopsis of it. You know when the book was published? March 1st, 2013. March
I
1st.
knew you were going to tell me that.
Yep, March 1st, 2013. And I said, I got to get this book. It was published on the 10th anniversary date of my daughter's death. And the significance of the number 10, one is always about beginnings.
Mm,
And if
yes.
you look at death as being a rebirth into a new existence, it is about beginnings.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that helped me shift my perspective, this is something I want to make sure I get this in if we got time,
Yeah. Yes.
um, is that I was at the time of Janine's death. She died at 12:30 in the morning on March 1st, and I was the last person to see her alive. I held her hand, and she took two breaths, and she died. And for years, I would say I was the last person to see Janine alive. And then another one of my friends, who's an interfaith minister in Long Island, um, by the name of Patty Farino. Patty told me that, and Patty's been a wise mentor for me on the journey. She said, why don't you look at it as you weren't the last person to see her alive, but you were the first person to usher her into her new existence. And when I looked at that, I said, that's pretty profound. And I hadn't looked at it
Yeah.
that way. Once I began looking at it that way, I looked at the moment of her death as different. I didn't look at it as the fact that she died. I looked at it as the fact that she was reborn
Mm,
into another dimension,
mm.
and that I was the person that perhaps she chose to usher her into that, to her new life.
And
And
you
so,
you were being the real dad. You were being the
yep,
real dad. Yeah.
yep, and that's something I believe was destined to happen at that particular moment. And um, and I look at that now, and I look at the moment of her death differently now. I don't look at it with the same amount of sadness and loss and longing and yearning that I did previously.
And I think that would give so many parents comfort too, just thinking that. I know, for me, it's quite profound, because I was the last one to speak with my son, so before he passed, and it's sort of weird how that. Well, it's not weird. I suppose it was meant to happen that way. I was the first person to greet him when he came into the world, and the last person to see him when he went into the next dimension. So yeah.
And that was, I think, the way it was destined for both of us. That was supposed to happen. You being the first person to usher Adam into his new life, and me being the first person to usher Janine into her new life. So there's another point of common ground between us in terms of the moment of our children's death, in terms of that serendipity or similarity in terms of our experience. But like I said, Patty presented that to me in a way that was just so profound, and she's been another very influential person on the path. I mean, she jump-started my awareness, threefold after spending time with her, and it helped me to really embrace a different perspective and walk in a whole different level of awareness. And she's just one of many people who I called in. I asked for it. I said I need people in my life who are going to give me a different perspective. And once I called it in, they haven't stopped coming in. They haven't stopped coming in. So, and it just proves that intention is a big part of that, is a big part of change. You state your intention, and and then the acts follow that are consistent with that. And people come into your life who you call in. It's like the power of attraction.
It is the good old law of attraction. It works every time. Doesn't fail.
It does to me. It does. If I'm having a bad day and I'm feeling negative, the things I call in are negative.
Yes.
If I'm having a good day, everything around me is positive.
That's right.
That's what gets called in. So I keep saying to myself, geez, you should not have those kind of negative days, but it's part of the human experience that we're going to have better. Some days are going to be better than others, and we can learn from that. We can learn from that.
We do, and then you experience the lows, but you experience great highs as well. So that's all part of the roller coaster of life, isn't it?
It is. It's just part of this, the amazing and sometimes beautiful roller coaster that life is.
Yeah, and you've got Janine on the ride with you, and I've got Adam on the ride with me. It's a different sort of world now with the two of them in there supporting us, and it's just amazing. I really thank you so much for sharing your story today, Dave. It's just been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure being here, Vicki, and thanks so much for having me on the show. It was an honor, and I hope what we've talked about will be of help to your viewers who are negotiating the path of grief. So
I'm sure it will. Yeah. Well, thanks everyone, and until next time, look after yourselves and enjoy life. Bye for now.